Chairman Stewart, Ranking Member Bonamici. I appreciate today's hearing on weather forecasting. In my view, it's a necessary part 2 on a subject that greatly impacts the American public and our greater economy. And I'm pleased that NOAA, which is headquartered in my congressional district, thank you, Dr. Sullivan, has the opportunity to be before our committee today and to discuss efforts to improve weather and climate forecasting. Today's panels are an improvement, I think, on the last that we've had. I'm concerned about the legislation that we're discussing today, and as indicated in the testimony of our witnesses, the legislation is really flawed in its execution, in my view. NOAA is a multi-mission agency, and that means its priorities, ocean, atmosphere, climate, and weather, are interconnected. I think Dr. Sullivan has testified to that today. And given what we've learned and experienced with increasingly severe and more frequent severe storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, it's hard for me to believe that you can separate or slash funding of climate research when all of our weather scientists and our forecasters indicate the kind of interconnectivity that Dr. Sullivan has discussed. Our Earth is a system, and I think in order to understand the processes, we have to understand it as a whole. And so with that, Dr. Sullivan, I know we've had a couple of one-on-one conversations about NOAA's work and concern about where we stand vis-a-vis Europeans in weather forecasting. And I know we talked about the lagging in our supercomputer computing power as evidenced by some of the different modeling that we saw with Hurricane Sandy. And so I wonder if you could explain to the committee some of the institutional differences between the U.S. government's role in weather forecasting versus Europeans that keep NOAA from being as cutting edge as we'd like it to be.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. The model that received such acclaim rightfully during the evolution of Hurricane Sandy, especially the early days, is a model run by the European Center for Midrange Weather Forecasting. That is a combination research and operational forecasting center that is charged with one and only one thing, and that is to run a global model that gives a 10 to 12-day forecast. They've become very good at that. It is definitely one of the leading models at that time range. What else to say? That is all they do at the European Center. So the rest of the products and services that most national hydrometeorological services like NOAA are charged with fall to the UK's Meteorological Office or Meteo France or the Deutsche Wetterdienst. So to really understand what Europe is doing, you need to take a look at both the European Center and the collection of federal or national level weather services throughout each of the European states. That's closer to comparable. What else does European Center do that we would love to emulate more closely? They make consistent progressive investments in their main operational supercomputer. They have set a target and a policy of staying very close to the bleeding edge of computational capacity. In the United States, in contrast, we tend to step forward an operational supercomputer and live with it for quite a while as it falls further and further behind the cutting edge, and then make a big step forward and let it fall back again. That's certainly been the case with work that's been going on at NOAA in the last 5 years. Europe has also focused on methods that determine how you take data into a model. It's a method called data assimilation, or a step called data assimilation. It's in some respects more important than what data do you have. You get the data in properly and understand the errors that it contains. They've pioneered new methods over at the European Center for Data Assimilation. They are very computationally intensive. We have not been able to adopt those methods in NOAA's operating supercomputers because they are so intensive.
Do we need to?
Well, I was just going to transition and say we know it's a good advance, and so our scientists, again, OAR scientists plus our satellite data scientists and our weather service scientists all together developed a method that is as effective and less computationally intensive. And proof of that solidity of that advance is that the Europeans are now going to adopt our method because it does the same work more efficiently. So stay closer to the cutting edge in our operational supercomputers. It would be good. Places like our center down in Norman that I cited as an example emulate the kind of close coupling of research and operations that the European Center has. So we do know how to do that, and we do it. but we do it in a little more distributed and more topic-oriented fashion around aviation weather challenges, severe storm challenges, and tropical storm challenges than they've chosen to do in Europe. But we have a greater array and greater variety of weather phenomena in the United States than all of Europe combined. And so I think our plurality and our diversity suits this country's needs.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Behavioral and social sciences research, because in the time that I've been on this committee, we have held hearings, not recently, on the use and effectiveness of social science research, and there are a number of members of this committee who have point-blank rejected the use of that kind of research in the work that we do. And so I'm intrigued, Dr. Droegemeier, by your testimony, and in particular on page 5 of your testimony, where you point both to a University of Oklahoma preliminary study as well as to the events surrounding the May 31st hurricane or tornado, rather, in Oklahoma City and Norman and surrounding communities. And you make a really compelling argument for the integration, building on a foundation of social science and behavioral research that would augment the kind of weather forecasting that we also need to invest in. And so I wonder if you could be a little bit more specific. You have one recommendation for building on that, but where, in what agencies would it be most appropriate if the Federal Government were involved in funding some of that research? I know that we do fund some research in other agencies, NIH, National Science Foundation, and the rest, but it's not all focused on weather forecasting. So if you could share your thoughts about that.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman. That's a really important point. And I think the term social sciences research is misunderstood. I think a lot of folks don't really know what all that involves. But the questions that we need to address are really fairly clear. They do involve human behavioral work. You're right. The National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, a lot of studies have been done, people that look at trust in terms of information and communication and verification. There's a broad body of literature already out there, but a lot of the social scientists, in fact, most of them, I don't think realize the opportunity that is available for them to come and link up with the weather community to really understand how to apply this body of scholarship. Number one, that already exists. Number two, to do new studies that are geared specifically toward the weather challenges. But I think a lot of it is misunderstanding of what the social sciences are really about. And I have to say, I had that same misunderstanding until I began working with them and really seeing the virtue of their activities.
And I did until I came to serve on this committee. I didn't get it at all. I thought it was kind of silly making, but it turns out that understanding behavior really should connect with the kinds of technology advances that we see. Do you have an idea of how much is spent, or whether it would be worth it to have some of those resources actually engaged through the National Weather Service and NOAA?
I think that's a good question. I don't know the amount of money that is spent, across agencies or even within agencies, but I do think that NOAA, it doesn't need to stand up a whole big social sciences activity. I mean, universities have entire social sciences programs across many, many departments. So I think NOAA is in a position to leverage that. But I do think there has to be a presence within NOAA that recognizes and helps, as Dr. Chen mentioned, transfer those research outcomes into the operational mainstream of decision making and behavior in terms of how we do the warning and watch system.
Great. And just with my remaining minute and a half, I want to each of you, if you could, to comment on the link, a link that you see or don't see between balancing NOAA's work on climate with the work on weather forecasting, and whether or how those things are connected, and whether you think that we've struck the right kind of balance.
Let's imagine that we didn't have a debate on anthropogenic climate change, human climate change. I believe we would be doing the same research on climate that we're currently doing just to improve our weather forecasting. So what we're doing is really essential to what we're doing in climate.
Yeah, I want to comment on the jointness of weather and climate, because the system is together. There is no artificial dividing line. For instance, hurricanes, we are very much in need of information of few weeks outlooks, so exactly for the water management. And at the same time, as each storm close to landfall, we do transition to the forecast part very smoothly. So I just want to also possible follow up on a question of the usual using social science to address this issue. Hurricane, for instance, is 7 days ahead, whether we can give a warnings and whether it's good, because that is interesting social science question. A lot of times our forecast is not precise, and that could be over-warning can actually do harm in terms of people's actions. So those are connected issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.